This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Hello and welcome. Today is January 29th. This is 6 p.m. We're in conference room 1, and this is the Bees Committee, more affectionately known as the Bees Committee, the Biodiversity, Environment, and Ecological Sustainability Committee. Can we just quickly, I know that everyone's here, but can we just quickly go around? There'll be introductions later in the agenda, but can we just quickly go around and state your name for the record so that we see that we have all the members here, and we can start to my right.
I'm Hal Weeks.
I'm Cassie Trager. I'm a conservation agent, but I'm not on the board. I'm just visiting for fun. Hi, I'm Elodie Chicklin.
I'm Sean Abbott.
David Jaffe.
I'm Genevieve Goldleaf.
Tamara Smith, I'm not on the board.
And JB Buckhead.
And I'm Owen Zaret. I'm the council representative. Does anyone have any objection to my running the meeting until we actually elect officers? Okay, can I have a motion for that then, please?
Move to have you run the meeting until we have officers.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. So first of all, thank you for being here. I know that there's been a lot of build-up. I'd say there's been a lot of buzz, but I've used that a million times, and I'm going to work on my pollinator puns, and I think we all should as part of the mission of this committee.
Oh my god.
Keep laughing.
We'll put it on the next agenda. It's actually not on the agenda, but we can make that agenda item. Why don't we all just set our names, or why don't we actually then start with introductions so we can better acquaint ourselves to knowing who we all are. I'll go in the opposite direction this time and start on my left.
All right, I am JB Buckhead. I am the chair of the Energy Advisory Committee. City of Easthampton, parent, 2 kids in Easthampton Public Schools. I also work with the Easthampton Youth Soccer Association.
Great.
Hi everyone, I'm Genevieve. I go by Jenny usually. I'm a landscape designer and I mostly focus on restoration using native plants. Most of my work is actually on Cape Cod, but it's pretty applicable. I've lived in Easthampton for 2 years, and this is my first committee meeting, so I'm very excited to be here.
I'm David Jaffe. I'm a retired clinical social worker. I've been an Easthampton resident since 2006. Since 2019, I've been serving on the Manhattan Rail Trail Committee, for which I am the clerk. And I'm excited about this group.
I'm Sean Abbott. I've been in Easthampton for about 2 years. Sort of an avid native gardener, and also definitely excited to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Elodie Chicklin. I've lived in Easthampton for 47 years. I'm part of the local agricultural scene. I am here as a representative from the Agricultural Commission, and my role is to participate and share updates about the bees activity on the AgCom.
Okay, I'm Hal Weeks. I serve on the Conservation Commission in town. I guess more importantly, I moved here about 6 years ago. I'm a retired marine biology, which is probably next to worthless for this committee. But yeah.
Anything else?
Oh, the other thing I would mention is the first thing I did at my new house was I tore out the front yard and created a pollinator garden.
Wonderful.
So, with mostly but not entirely native species.
I'm Owen Zaret. I'm the city council representative. I've lived here in Easthampton for 24 years. Have an interest in sustainability practices, pollinator biodiversity protection, and native plants in order to accomplish that. Happy to be here. Just wanted to also recognize we have 2 city councilors here. City Council President, Precinct 2 Councilor Omar Gomez, and Tamara Smith, and our Conservation Agent, Cassie Traeger. So thank you for being here. And thank you everyone for introducing yourself and committing even more time on a volunteer basis to be here and participate in what a committee that I'm really excited about. I'm very thankful to the council for forming this committee. So next on the agenda is, I think, election of officers. Is there anyone here who either has an interest in being in chairing or wants to nominate anyone for chair?
Okay.
You're interested?
Chair, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else interested or wants to nominate anyone? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to nominate Sean Abbott then for chair.
Seconded.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
No stump speech?
Let me just write that down. So, Sean. Let's see. Sean, do you want to take it from here then? As the chair?
Can, but you'll probably have to keep me on the straight and narrow.
Okay.
I don't think I have the agenda.
Sure. So next on the agenda is so we just elected a chair. We need a vice chair.
Okay.
Is anyone interested in?
Anybody want to volunteer to be a vice chair or nominate somebody else to be a vice chair?
I'd be interested in doing so only to help kind of help you navigate this committee since I'm sort of responsible for this.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Unless someone else wants to do it.
Just curious, what would the expectations of a vice chair be in office?
Yeah, so they would run them. So similar to other committees, run the meeting when the chair is absent. The ordinance has kind of some vague language that the committee or the chair could create a role or designate certain roles to the vice chair as needed. That's pretty much. I can pull up the ordinance too if you. Okay. And obviously, I'm volunteering myself, but obviously anyone else should feel free to speak up as well.
Do you want to?
Are you sure?
Still a sweet secretary roll up for grabs after this too.
I nominate Owen for vice chair.
Seconded.
You're in the meeting. And
Oh, right. Motion is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Go.
Okay, let me get you to the next. Okay, Mr. Chair, next on our agenda is the discussion of clerkship. The ordinance doesn't specify exactly how this committee could be clerked. We could nominate and elect a single clerk, or we could do this by committee, and so like on a rotating basis. So I'll leave that item to you to open up for discussion if you'd like.
Does anybody want to volunteer to be the clerk? And I think I probably know the answer to this, but I figure I'll ask.
Do folks with other committee experience have opinions about what is more functional for the group?
I think having the consistency of one person, and because I do it for the rail trail committee, and I think it makes things simpler because you have consistency in terms of how the notes are presented.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think because it can be laborious,
Right.
Somebody may get tired of it. So I think if somebody is willing to do that, they should commit to it for at least, a year or two, or minimum.
Or N months. Or at least some number of months
Yeah.
for starters. Would anybody be willing to do it for, say, 3 months? And then we can readdress if they're getting burnt out after a few.
I think I need more information. How often is this committee meeting? It's like a couple months, it's 2 meetings worth of notes. That's not that much, but it's like 1 could be more.
I would imagine that we're going to decide at some point this evening how often we're going to meet. And personally, I would say we should probably start off with a little bit more frequent than every couple of months to get rolling, so that we know what we're doing. I was expecting sort of once a month myself, although if anybody else has any other opinions.
No, I think at least monthly, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd imagine monthly. I think just based on the commitments that would be my request to the rest of the group. We have 3 members here who actually represent other committees, and then and I think other people who are either on other committees or just have busy lives. And so trying to assemble everyone more than once a month might be difficult. And I think so once a month would probably be a sweet spot. That would be my recommendation to the group.
Sounds good. And I do believe in terms of like trying to get work done, which I think is going to require more than we can do in a month, we are thinking about a process of subcommittees, which can then assemble without using full quorum and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So those won't need clerkship or anything, but then we would have, hypothetically stuff to talk about coming out of those subcommittees and decisions to make for each particular month. So, yeah, but I think I do personally feel like if we just got somebody to do it to get us through like the inaugural organizational steps, then we can readdress it and see how people are feeling about committing to the committee, where people are at, that kind of stuff. So still looking for volunteers and nominations though. Cool, thank you very much.
Thank you for throwing yourself on a sword.
Elodie. I move that we make Elodie Tricklin a clerk for an interim period of 3 months.
Second.
Nomination or motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that's good.
Thanks for raising your
Thank
you very much. Yes,
That's 3 months?
3 months.
Okay.
And we can throw on the 3-month agenda the reappraisal. And hopefully it won't take too long.
I'm just taking the minutes for this meeting, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, girl.
Very kind.
Okay, Mr. Chair, next on the agenda is basically a review of the Xerxes Society B designation. That's what kind of initiated this, the formation of this committee, although my understanding is that we'll take on other pieces of sustainability, ecology, environmental issues as well. I think to be transparent, with the climate action plan from the city, there'll probably be items that will land in this committee as well as submissions from members. So is that something you want?
Yeah, I mean, should we take off the major points of what's required for that as kind of an opening gambit? I think there's like 10 of them or something.
Would you like me to go through them, or if you want?
You have a computer up, that would be, please.
Sure.
There are 8.
Oh.
8.
Ah.
At least I counted 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's kind of 2 different pieces here to the B City. There's the commitments, which we have here. Thank you for printing those out. And then there's also the process to becoming the actual B City. So I'll explain the commitments first, and if it's okay with the chair, I'll explain how we get to that, because the second part's actually really the first part, but I'm going to explain this. So what does it mean to be a B City USA? So first, establish a standing B City USA committee to advocate for pollinators, which we've done here. We've already accomplished 1/7 of our goal. There was a pretty thorough discussion on the council level about how to do this, and that's how we landed to where we are today. Create and enhance pollinator habitat in public and private lands by increasing the abundance of native plants and providing nest sites. So that will be something we're going to discuss in terms of how to utilize, encourage the city to utilize green space in fostering native plant spaces. And as somewhat of a corollary to that, incorporate pollinator conscious practices into city policies and plans. There's a number of cities around the country, and here in Massachusetts we have Somerville, who actually have a native plant ordinance. There's a variety of ways to do this. Again, these are things that we'll talk about in our future meetings. Host pollinator awareness events. I think that Xerxes Society requires one pollinator awareness event each year. I know that there's an eager group of residents who want to be engaged and who might be able to be helpful with that. Publicly acknowledge Bee City USA affiliation with signs and an online presence. And then, of course, pay an initial application fee, an annual renewal fee. I believe that's something like $200 to figure out how to get that money. And annually apply for renewal and report on the previous year's activities. So.
Okay. For the couple of first things where it was, create and maintain habitat, et cetera, is there any validation that they are expecting to be able to do that, or does that just go through the reports and the paperwork that we send in?
I don't know, but that's certainly something I could ask.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of initial
That will be
conversations.
And do they have a local representative, or what's their presence like? What is not knowing a whole lot about them? Like, where do they sit? Where do they?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, if it's okay with the chair, I can segue kind of into how we get to the next piece. So to get to this is part of the actual kind of legislative and municipal work that we'll be doing, but first we have to kind of go through this whole application step just to even get to working on some of these policy points. So if it's okay, I'll go through those one by one, and I'm going to answer your question with one of them.
Yes, please.
So the application steps are form a committee, which we've done. Every city does this differently. We chose to do this as a separate new committee formed by ordinance. Great, we're here. Assign facilitation to a local government body or nonprofit organization, which is, again, what we'll be doing here. The Bees Committee will essentially be the facilitating body for these conversations. Designate a local department as a sponsor, and I think this sort of answers your question. So the Xerxes Society is is nationwide, and we need to have basically someone who's going to be our liaison to them. So we'll have to figure this out, have to discuss with the city. I had some preliminary conversations with the planning department essentially being the sponsoring department, and potentially someone affiliated with that department like the conservation agent potentially being the liaison. But this all goes on the resolution that we have to basically submit to them that essentially will outline the work that we're going to be doing and get them to approve it. And then they essentially approve us as a Bee City without even having done this.
Because that all happens at year one.
Correct. So complete the online application form, complete the draft Bee City resolution. So there's a resolution that we complete, and in that it will have the sponsoring department, I think who the potential liaison is, who the committee is that's managing all of this. We submit to Xerxes Society just for the review. Assuming they say okay and this committee approves it, then we submit it to the city council for a conversation and a vote. And then submit the application resolution to your local government for approval, and then submit your adopted resolution and pay the application fee, which in this case, yes, it's $200. So we'll have to figure out exactly how that money is going to, part of the conversation is going to be where that $200 will come from. Is there anything else I can tell you at this time?
No, I think that more or less.
Did I read where there was a certain time of year they want things submitted?
It's rolling.
would that also mean our yearly report is a year after acceptance?
I can look into that. I haven't looked that far ahead.
Okay.
I would hope we could
Not
tell
fully,
them when
but-
we would submit a yearly report.
Yeah.
I mean, let's figure out what we're going to do, and then we can figure out when we're going to talk about it and mail it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, were you also referencing like in terms of we have to report back to the city council at a certain juncture?
I was just talking about Xerxes Society, but I suspect we will probably want to let the city council know.
Right, because I think that's written into the
Yeah.
ordinance.
Because I was asking my question about like a local representative or something, that just the chance that if, as we're going through this process, it might be worth, if they did have somebody that could maybe come to a meeting and like talk to us directly about their process or help us, guide us to the right resources, or, hey, here's some things that have worked elsewhere, just to have that direct conversation with somebody, I think is always useful.
Even if they don't have somebody local, we can probably get a.
Or, correct, that good hybrid type thing,
yeah. I think a step towards that is when I was finding this, there was a listing of other cities. And I think attached to that were the reports of many of them.
All right.
And so we could look at what other cities have done and, cherry pick, mimic,
Not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So, and just learn from that.
Yep. So, along those lines, do we want to start talking about subcommittees so that we can start thinking about how we want to sort of start accumulating knowledge towards the resolution? Right.
So when I submitted this to the council, I basically submitted like a partially completed resolution with all the information I had at the time. So I can distribute that to the members after this meeting.
Okay.
And then I'd leave it up to you how you then would want us to run with that. If you want to wait, then have everyone review and wait till the next meeting to be able to then have a more in-depth discussion about how we're going to complete this. Or
I mean, personally, I feel like we can probably try and move it further along than read, a month to read it.
yes.
Other folks may disagree, but I think we can take that as a starting point, but also either individually or as a group, we can, or as a, with a subcommittee or whatever, we can try and work our way through and come up with basically a rough draft. I don't see any reason to let the paperwork sit. Yes.
So are you suggesting basically a group of 3 or fewer as a work group to basically be able to discuss between the meeting and make some phone calls?
Yep.
See which department is willing to sponsor us, see which individual from that department is willing to be the liaison. I'm just looking in your direction, not like looking at you, Cassie. And be able and come forward with some form of draft for the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds reasonable to me. Obviously, I leave it to the rest of the group to say what they'd like to do.
Well, this has sort of been rolling around in my head for the last couple of days. So, what we've discussed now are sort of administrative steps, which I think is important, and, we can start that. But then the other thing that's been rolling around in my head, which is more, forgive my terminology, I'm going to call them substantive actions, for lack of a better term. And I think we should noodle on these, share those, and pick a smaller set of priorities. Because if we try to do everything, we will end up doing nothing. Whereas if we can come to some agreement on, okay, this is the first thing we're going to do, this is the second, this is the third, we can make some progress on it, do a decent job, build some momentum, and do that. So, I think the priority setting and resulting approach needs thought from each of us and discussion and decision by the group.
Yep.
So I think that should happen next meeting with homework for each of us.
Do you think that the priority setting, because we all know that we have the sort of the administrative checkbox that this needs to be done. And
Yes.
in a lot of ways, more than administrative checkbox, it's also guidance, but
Right.
it is sort of like the first thing we're working towards. So can we, that list, because the initial resolution is not, we don't actually have to accomplish very much for that. It's the steps of talking to some people, getting our points of contact, preparing to submit that resolution to the city council and to the Xerces Society. So I feel like that can be priority one, and sort of if we all agree on that here, and then we could be working on that, and then we can also talk about like steps 2 through 4 at the next meeting.
Sure, and what I was giving voice to was, in my mind, 2 through 4. I have no problems with, the initial steps as you suggested. We get going on that. I mean, just the sort of things I'm thinking of. I like to garden, so I've got what's in my garden. I have made a really half-baked attempt to identify the bees in my garden.
Nice.
And have, at this stage, thrown up my hand. Ichthyology is not useful for studying bees. But in a more serious vein, one possible priority is encouraging residents to do more gardening and connect them with resources for how they can understand what's visiting their gardens. An extension of that, which I think is largely beyond us, is how on earth do we decide what limiting resources are for bees around Easthampton and whether availability of flowers are limiting to the bees? So that's another thing. A related item are public events. I think on the list was
one event per year.
Yeah. And so we can, figure out, okay, how would we do this? And the thing which comes immediately to mind to me is partnering with the Piscomic Conservation Trust at their annual plant sale, and we can have an event in parallel with them and take advantage of that. A third thing, what can we do to encourage the city departments to use pollinator-friendly practices? Well, to what degree are they using pollinator-unfriendly practices right now? Herbicides, pesticides. Find that out and then see what we can do to affect some change there. So those are the 3 sort of big ideas of which we've been rattling around, and I'm sure they can be refined and extended any number of ways. And at this point, I feel like I've just been waving my hands. So,
Sure.
So what I'd like to do next meeting is hear where other people are coming on these, and which should be first.
Yeah.
And just to toot my own horn. I mean, again, I like my garden. I'm happy to have people come over and visit my garden, and I'll explain to them what I did and how, and things which have worked, things which haven't worked. I'm happy to be hopefully part of that in a constructive way.
Yeah, no, I think a good piece of homework for all of us for the next time is coming in with our short lists of what we want the priorities to be, figuring out how to make those priorities. And, one of the things that I've been thinking about when I was like doodling around about this is having sort of like 3 kind of major areas, which is action, outreach, and ordinances, as like kind of the 3 areas that I wanted to be focusing on. And there's a possibility, and again, this is something that I think we'll end up working out next time, that like if we can have 1 or 2 priorities for each of those kind of categories, and that also falls nicely into potential subcommittees that people can work on. And that also kind of allows people to align with their interests to a certain extent. Because, you know, for instance, action is going to be things like actually holding the events, city cleanup days, planting events, you know, all that sort of stuff. Outreach could be anything from like tabling at farmers markets to, you know, door to door, to putting in flyers, all this other stuff. And then ordinances is obviously a little bit more of that administrative stuff that we're kind of going to be starting with the committee. So we could hypothetically along those lines kind of have our like ordinances or our administrative subcommittee kind of like volunteer up today, and the rest of it can be a little bit more loosey-goosey in preparation for next time. But I absolutely think we should put the priority lists and priorities, you know, further priorities discussion on the next agenda. Obviously some of us have already like have some ideas here, so it's possible that, I mean, I think there's other things on our agenda for this evening, but it's possible that we could do a little bit of that initial discussion later on if folks have time, but so I guess where I'm coming right now is why don't would folks be amenable to deciding on sort of an initial like ordinance subcommittee that is going to be looking, you know, working with Owen, who's already volunteered, so I presume he's going to probably be participating in that. Could be wrong on establishing that draft resolution for us to like really dig into and review next time. Anybody? I'll do a motion in a minute. Does anybody have any other discussion points?
So what would be under that umbrella beyond the resolution? Like, are we also going to look into the city establishing sort of ordinances around use of, you know, herbicides and pesticides and so forth, as I think other communities have?
I mean, I would vote yes. I would.
Yeah, I think I left that part out when I was reading through the commitments. That's one of the commitments is reducing the use of pesticides. I might have skipped over that. I apologize. But that's one of the things we have to do.
Yeah, and I think we should be looking at what the city wants. Like, obviously, we're not going to be doing that on our own. We have to go through the representatives of the city, so I don't think there's a lot of danger that we're going to, you know, like, do anything untoward by trying to come up with, you know, sort of guidance via ordinance for some cases. And, you know, some of this is like, if we are going to be a city, I think we want Easthampton to be investing money in, you know, for where it has where it has civic control of things. I think we want it to be investing money in like things that are pro biodiversity and ecology. And, you know, my guess is, not having a lot of experience, but it feels like an ordinance is a sort of way to go about that. So,
how do the ordinances typically kind of originate and come before the council? Is it through this ordinance subcommittee, or do people sort of show up at those meetings and they say, you know, we need something on this, and then it builds sort of some critical mass?
Yeah, so generally, I mean, there's a few generally it's work done in the background. So the ordinance, and for a variety of reasons, so ordinances will come to the city council from a few different ways. You may have a councilor who's interested in doing X, Y, and Z, and so they write it up and they present it. You might have something, for instance, from like planning where they identify a need to rezone in a certain way, and they'll usually talk to a sponsor or sponsors of councilors, work through the language that gets presented that way. You know, those are kind of the typical, and so the entry point is it's presented, it's submitted to the city council as an agenda item as new business, which has some certain prerequisites in terms of what the language has to look like. It has to be somewhat complete or mostly complete and fleshed out before getting then sent to typically the ordinance subcommittee, but any committee can take on anything. So like for instance, this committee was formed via ordinance from the Rules of Government Relations Committee. So then it goes to one of the subcommittees of the city council and gets discussed and amended and then comes back to the city council for a full vote. And similar to kind of some of the processes that Sean's been talking about here, is Sean okay? Do you want me to call you chair, Mr. Abbott?
Sean's
okay. You know, there may be kind of like some work that's done outside of meetings, within the confines of open meeting law, where, oh, well, we didn't think of this in this ordinance, so we have to do some homework, bring it back to the ordinance committee, keep working on that, going through until it gets brought back. Does that answer your question? But yeah, I have the only entry point is that the city council has a new agenda item, which I think gets referred to committee and discussed in committee. But there's a lot of background that goes to that before it even gets to that point. Yeah. I mean, and actually, do you mind if I take the floor really quickly now? I mean, I'd say that my opinion is, of all the commitments and the work that we're going to have to do, the ordinance piece in that language is going to probably take the longest time. There's probably a lot of low-hanging fruit here that we'd probably be able to knock out really quickly. Like, I'm sure we could probably come up with really quickly with a list of 3 to 5 easy, well, not even necessarily easy, but 3 to 5 pollinator awareness things and public engagement things, like probably right off the bat, and really firm those up really quick. Obviously publicly acknowledging the visa to USA is pretty easy, but some of the public-facing stuff we'll probably be able to do that really quickly and effectively, I think. So I just wanted to put that out there. The ordinance language is going to probably take a lot of time and vetting with stakeholders, and there's a lot of people to kind of get their preliminary approval before we even start putting it forward. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, all of which is I think part of why forming that and kind of getting started is important. The language, not. So back to the idea of going ahead and forming sort of our ordinances subcommittee and kind of tasking them to work on the resolution that we would then be submitting to the cities and or the city council. Today, is there any other discussion that we want to have around that?
Can I interject? I just want to make sure everyone understands the difference between an ordinance versus a resolution. Because an ordinance would be a change in the local written code of what we have to follow by law, whereas a resolution is a suggestion and a moral standing of how we feel about issues, but doesn't carry the same weight. And so just because I felt like the two terms were being used interchangeably, I wasn't sure if everyone was aware of that, so that's all.
Thank you. Yeah, in my mind, we were discussing the resolution because that's what's required by Xerces in order to go forward with the Xerces B city designation.
Yep.
And then as a further future thing, we were talking about actual ordinances to carry the weight of law to require the city to have an awareness of, whatever this means. That'll be, I'm sure, the discussion of, as Owen was pointing out, a very long conversation.
Yeah.
In terms of what we actually want to commit to that level of requirement.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So how do we do the movement thing for this? Oh.
Well, a couple. I don't think you need a formal motion. If you want to basically get some consensus of 2 to 3 people who will take the current draft resolution and just say yes, will be our homework, and we'll reach out and make some phone calls and figure. I don't think you need a formal motion for that. You can just probably get people to agree to do that.
Great.
So, what do we need to sort of fill out to flesh out the resolution?
Yeah, I can pull it up. I actually haven't looked at it in a while, but I think generally what we would need is we would need to get a department to agree to basically be the sponsoring department. I think, like I said, the preliminary conversation was with planning. That makes the most sense. We would need a liaison, so we would need to get someone probably within that department to agree to be the liaison. I think that what was blank was which committee was actually facilitating everything globally, but we know that now, so that's pretty easy. I think generally, it's just basically getting some agreement from a city department to be the sponsoring department and figure out who would be the liaison within that. Planning makes the most sense. Someone would have to have a conversation with them and have them basically agree to that, and then probably a representative, an employee from within that department. There's potentially some other creative ways of doing it as well, if planning is not interested. Bless you. DPW or parks comes to mind, although those are probably less likely. I don't get the sense that planning will say no, but we just have to ask them to make it official, and then we have to again come up with the liaison. So I don't think it's a lot. It's not a lot, actually.
So is it just more of a figurehead thing, like they're representing themselves as, supporting this or sponsoring it or whatever? I mean, what does it mean to be a liaison?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that would be on paper the official person who's communicating with the Xerxes Society about the work that we're doing here.
Is it also worthwhile for folks looking into that? Because sounds like it's mostly thought out to be looking at what the reports are going to require and some of the other stuff along those lines?
Probably.
Do folks who might be willing to participate in that little venture?
I will.
David.
I absolutely am. I just also want to make sure that if there's other people who are interested, that I open the opportunity to them before I jump in.
We'll catch you out soon.
Okay, that's fine. I just I want to be here to help. I also don't want to be here to monopolize.
This there was a subcommittee to work on the language.
We are required by the Xerxes Society to put a resolution forward to the city committee that says we want to be part of the Xerxes Society, and it has some requirements that we have to put out. Yeah, basically coming up with a draft of that, putting that together, and then we were also talking about starting to do prep work on understanding what the reports were going to be, anything we would have to gather along those lines. And then bringing that information back to this group for sort of, hopefully a discussion, and ideally maybe a sign-off, but depending. I mean, I have no idea how fast we'll be able to move on it. But again, with those early ones, I think if we can, especially because it doesn't sound like there's a lot of extra meat that needs to be put together there. It seems to me if we can move relatively rapidly on that, then we can pay our attention for
resources.
Right.
Somebody's already done it.
Yeah.
And just imitate. And identify resources that are already in existence. Support the work.
You want to do
I thought you already had
that. We're not going to be looking for 30.
We need 3 per committee.
We don't need, it's, the short thing about it is, I mean, do we need?
So a couple things I just would want to recommend. I'd be cautious about using the word committee, because that might imply that we have to actually have public meetings and meet and schedule more. Like if it's a sub-quorum, then we're entitled to basically meet and discuss outside of this. So you might want to call it a working group, or just people willing to do the homework. Just wanted to put that out there.
I
think then given there's 7 members.
Yeah, so 2 to 3.
Right, so okay.
Yeah, so 3 is the max. If people want eyes on it. I think the other part of it is knowing what the working groups are going to be, so that if somebody gets excited about something, they're not accidentally violating open meeting ordinance by reaching out too much or getting together or whatever. So it kind of sets boundaries for folks. So yeah, Owen and David, does anybody else want to join in with that? Also, are there rules we have to be aware about in terms of overlapping working groups?
I mean, I have to think about that in terms of how that may or may not affect could constitute a quorum, and how that
Right, because when I was reading the open meeting law after like almost stepping in it the first time, I was like, you can't at least intentionally be doing overlapping things in order to pass information.
Mm-hmm. I can look into.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
I mean, I would volunteer that unless there's a third person, like for the purpose of this, finishing this up and bringing it back to the next meeting. I think 2 of us is fine.
Okay.
So, but obviously if there's, the more the merrier.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like.
Under a quorum, of course.
Okay.
The more-ish, the merrier.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so I think if you gentlemen are willing to volunteer for that, and then hopefully we'll, I think we are hoping to see a more or less full drafts by next meeting, which hopefully will be next month. Cool. All right. Let's see, is there anything else on the official agenda?
Yeah, so, yes, so I just wanted to call your attention, Mr. Chair, just to one thing, just that, so the next thing on the agenda is announcements, and we do have the conservation agent here, and I just want to encourage you, if you wanted to allow her to speak at all about any potential role or just her thought about this, if that pleases you.
Ms. Shredder, would you like to tell us about it?
Yeah, so I appreciate the previous discussion talking about a liaison and things like that. I think that's helpful to understand, because I know, that was part of the discussions, was the planning department might be a logical place to find that. The decision is sort of to Jeff Bagg, the city planner. He's my supervisor. And so whether it makes sense for me to be that or not, it is a really cool opportunity, certainly. And one thing I think additionally about it is that I did want to make you all aware that we do have, and some of you helped form this with the Pollinator Action Plan, has been written, that was done with the Conway School. And the staff person who pursued that in the planning department was Eli Block, the assistant planner, but he's no longer with the department. And now the assistant planner is Dylan Maxfield. So I don't know if maybe Jeff might think like the assistant planner might make more sense for me, or I don't know. But yeah, that I think will be a piece that with that working group, those folks, maybe we can talk about that with Jeff later or something. And then the other piece of the in terms of capacity for myself is that I am the conservation agent for the Conservation Commission, as Hal knows. That's probably my primary role, and that involves me organizing those meetings, going to them, doing the minutes, all the administrative work associated with that, and the permits that they have. And then I also, I don't know what you call my role with the Energy Advisory Committee, but
basically the liaison as
Don't
well.
forget site visits.
And site visits, that's right, Hal for Conservation Commission. But yeah, so I guess kind of like a liaison to the planning department for the Energy Advisory Committee right now is what I function as. Really just focusing on a couple projects for that, which is the Green Communities designation, and the development of the Climate Action Plan that we've been working on for some time now. And then, what am I forgetting? It's another big project that was doing this, EV chargers, I guess, which kind of wraps into the other ones. But
Right.
Those are the heavy hitters for sure. And I'm trying to think what else. My hope is that Pollinator Action Plan seems like maybe potentially a good place to start. I have not looked at it very closely, admittedly, but I know at very least it identified locations of potential pollinator gardens, like example gardens that might be good on site. That was informed by public opinion, which was cool. So it could be a great place to start. And then hopefully there certainly should be elements in the Climate Action Plan that I think would be very interesting for you guys to look at and share your opinions on. So, or even potentially pursue. But that one's we're still working on, coming along though. Trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, and do you think Is there anything else that I could be helpful for you to talk about? Those are the main things that I.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge, first of all, thank you for being here and find out get you to introduce yourself and also find out your comfort level with some of these conversations we're having too. So that was, yeah.
Right. I mean, I think definitely it's been the most helpful experience has been with working with the Energy Advisory Committee, because it probably could be something to that level. Like, I don't think I could be the person to take minutes and things like I do for the Conservation Commission, but certain projects might make most sense for me to help with. But and then that liaison role could be helpful to learn, get like a real set list of what would be required of that person.
Okay.
That probably would be most helpful for Jeff to see and help him make that decision. So
Makes sense.
yeah, thank you for inviting me and letting me know what's going on. So I appreciate it.
Great. Go ahead.
Along those lines, maybe it might be helpful just to make the suggestion, if there's people that are interested in digging into the pollinator action plan and trying to start pulling out from there, like ways that would translate to what we're going to do here, both in terms of policy and how we might be able to identify either specifically or more by way of certain criteria what we would be looking at for like city parcels that would be used. So there might be someone across the table from you who's interested in doing that. So I think that is a pretty dense document. So I just wanted to put that out.
I'll help you with that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to say I went to the Conway School and I'm very familiar with like the process of how they put that report together and the tools that they use to make it. And I'm also in touch with the people who put it together. So I was just reading through it the other week and it has some very, very clear directives for starting places. So I'd be delighted to.
That sounds good.
The only thing I would add is that anybody else who wants to look at it, I mean, I can print you a copy before we leave today, if anyone wants to wait. But then,
I think I have it from online.
oh yeah, but then the easier way to get it would be if you just go on the city website and search Pollinator Action Plan, it'll come right up. And so you can download the digital version also.
Good. Go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question, just for the record? So Genevieve, you said Jenny's okay?
Jenny's great.
Is it I'm sorry,
J-E-N-N-Y.
G-E-N-Y?
It's J. Thank you for asking.
Oh, it's
J-E-N-N-Y.
okay. So that.
Yeah, I realize it could go either way.
Okay. That was all.
Okay, great. So I believe we have also just gotten a commitment from Jenny and Hal to go through the pollinator action plan and come back with recommendations for early, probably as part of the prioritization conversation that we're planning on having next time, but certainly a prioritization.
Well, I think that would, be good guidance and avoid duplication of effort for both action items and outreach items.
Yeah.
So it seems to me common sense will work.
Yeah. Okay. Great. What else do we have on the agenda?
Well, so we're still kind of in quasi in this announcements thing. If there's anyone who has anything they wanted to basically say or announce about.
Are there any other announcements, sir?
Not for me. I don't know. Am I allowed to open the floor to the member of the public who's here as part of this?
Go for it.
I just
Sure, I mean,
okay. Yeah, I just noticed that. Well, Lee, I don't know if you want to say anything, but I just wanted to give you a chance since you showed up, and I know we talked briefly the other day, and like you're talking about actions within the schools and things. So wasn't sure if you wanted to, if you're prepared to give a spiel.
Thanks.
Sure.
I'm here because I'm working with the Mountain View PTO, which has a green team component, and we just received funding to start an environmental club for the students at Mountain View, and we are working on 3 projects, we hope to. Once we've identified the teachers we're going to pay to help us, but one of those is to work on waste reduction, advocacy in the cafeteria. We've started it and the kids are excited about it, but we haven't successfully made it anywhere. And the second is to start planning for a pollinator garden at the school with the kids. The third is just to allow them to bring up their issues that they're concerned about environmentally in town, and even to get them to maybe come to to school committee and voice those during public speak. Maybe come here and voice them during public speak.
Fantastic.
So I can certainly be a link to some of that. And the second reason I'm coming is because I also received money at HCC designing a service learning course in biodiversity, and one of the focuses is going to be on pollination and starting to garden on that campus, but also reading through the Easthampton Pollinator Action Plan as is. It's like gonna be a document we study and try to get that town, talking about mimicry, imitation, to be on board since we're sharing sides of the mountain in some capacity. So I have a meeting on Friday, and I'll just be bringing up that this meeting happens. I have my hands in a lot of pots, so I'm not going to raise my hand to be like volunteering to lead things, but kind of back to what you're saying and not inventing the wheel. Question I have is, after attending here and then attending the climate action and going to pass the comic and then going to the PTO, I don't know if there's a way to get the stars aligned, but there's a lot of us who would like to be going to all these things. How do you make it available so you can go to them maybe all in a row? Or I don't know if there's any thought there, but
Yeah, I mean, so one of the
something
things.
to think about.
One of the things in terms of making that easier for people that I think we should be discussing is having hybrid options for these meetings, which, personally I highly recommend, and that also makes it a lot easier for people to make it to more meetings. I think it actually increases civic engagement significantly. So, I figured one of the things we would be doing is towards the end of this or whenever is getting around to setting up the next meeting and potentially setting up a schedule, and as part of that discussion, whether or not we want to have that now or in the near future, we should decide whether or not we want to have, online component to these meetings. Should we just have that discussion now?
That is actually technically the next agenda item, Mr.
Look
Chair.
at that serendipity. Look at that serendipity. Okay, official. Does anybody have thoughts about hybrid versus not hybrid? In-person, timing, dates and times?
Those my dates. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Hybrid's great. The city technology department has made it easy for us to start running hybrid meetings, which we didn't do for a while, and it's been successful. Thanks to Cassie especially, who helps me get that up and running every time. So I'm all in favor of that.
Great.
Although I do love the in-person action as well. But.
I mean, for me, I sort of suspect that there's a good chance that we will be doing lots of other action-y things for this particular group. So having the actual official meetings be, I don't think remote is going to slow down our engagement and activity together. I mean, sort of a segue, but I have ideas for things like plant lux, which are like potlucks, but also with plants. So, but yeah, does anybody, mostly saw nodding, does anybody have an argument that we should hold these only in person?
I do think having hybrid, it does impact the person that's the clerk trying to capture the essence of discussions. The person can hybrid online, but from what I understand you're saying is this committee would be in person with an option for community members to join virtually.
That's one option. We could also potentially even go for purely virtually, which actually, because even though the technology does work well, I mean, I don't know if we can go pure virtually. Can we go pure virtually? It seems like, I know like Edict.
Yeah,
is
Edict
all
does
online.
total online, right? So I think you do that. It gets up to the committee and the chair to
Right.
set that.
Oh,
The hybrid option would allow committee members to also be remote, and members of the public could also come in person, right? Hybrid means you can do either one.
Yes.
Anybody can do either one.
I would be of the mind that we should absolutely have hybrid for a variety of reasons, participation both in terms of members here as well as the public. I think that we should try to get as many members here in person as possible, but with the understanding that our schedules can be complicated, and so hence the reason for opening it up to hybrid. I also would want to look into, so I'd be generally in favor of that. I also would want to look into kind of what the timeline is right now for allowing hybrid meetings and how long that's going to last, and when it may or may not expire. Just wanted to have some conversations about that. But yeah, so that's all. But I think we should absolutely be hybrid to the fullest extent that we can be.
One more thing, just from a note-taking standpoint, one of the good things about hybrid with the Google Meet option is it does record. It will send you a recording of the meeting. So if you need to go back and refine notes or figure out what was happening, what somebody was saying that you may have missed in real time, there's you will get access to that.
So would we need to have some language around recording people? If they're letting people know, if we are using that option, that there has to be some language that are being recorded.
Yeah, I think we'd have to tell people. I think that's usually announced at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah.
There's
A little
there's boilerplate
aware
that
about
says,
that.
there's boilerplate that just says this meeting is being recorded. I think you can even get a transcript maybe from Google Meet.
That's what I was gonna say, that's an option as well. It usually ends up being a transcript where it's all coming from one person, as it were, because of how it is.
Right.
So it's a little, you have to parse through it. It's not like
Right.
it doesn't generate minutes for you, and
If you've got multiple people in the same room, it's
Yeah.
going to view those all as one person, right?
but folks online
Right.
it will identify each of them, so that's helpful.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is just, I don't know how you might be able to speak this better, but, and how you like it, but the Conservation Commission does it where the preference is for the people on the commission to attend in person, but then they can attend virtually if there's an issue where they have to stay home or something like that. If someone says COVID, but they feel fine, but then you all try to make it in person if you can. So it's kind of
We
like,
do our best.
yeah,
You don't get any candy if you participate virtually.
that's.
We had somebody in California who was able to make our last meeting that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
Right, so, yeah.
I mean, I have, this actually will probably be a thing that's, might be our first interesting vote. I actually would prefer to do pure virtual if I had my druthers. I mean, and part of where I'm coming from with that is I work remote. I have great relationships with everybody that I work with. It does not, to my mind, actually reduce the co-workiness of any of that, and we're going to have a lot of in-person time with action and outreach at the very least. And the other advantage of a pure virtual is it does, in fact, all these issues that you're having. Like hybrid is actually probably the hardest thing to understand for folks, because the room mics and the cameras and stuff do not do a great job. They do a adequate job that makes things function. So, like, for me, I would vote pure virtual. It's not like a hard line. I'm not gonna fight with anybody over it. But if we put it to a vote, that's how I will vote.
I want to make two recommendations. One is to figure out when the next meeting will be.
Yes.
And two, maybe to mull some of this stuff over until next meeting. And I can also, on my end, try to look into exactly all the regulations we have within the city and beyond about what the rules are for hybrid or fully remote and how that's done. If there's certain committees that have to, or others that don't. Like for city council, for instance, obviously we're in person. We have to be in person with quorum.
Right.
All our meetings are hybrid. But yeah, I'll have some conversations with some of the higher ups and those who know more than I do about this. But I'd say for our next meeting, either in person or hybrid, and try to have a more thorough discussion about what then beyond that would look like.
That sounds good.
If that's
I think that
it's reasonable to people.
Should folks want to vote on next meeting, hybrid or in person? Or do we just want to sort of nod along?
I mean,
I don't know that we need.
my other thought is that as we're getting going and getting acquainted with each other, there's a benefit to being together in the same room that's not comparable to being together remotely. And maybe it's being old school or just old. But I think the interpersonal interactions and the kind of conversations you can have where it's not mediated through a screen, there's intangible benefits. And I think as we're moving forward, it's a little easier then to sort of jump into remote than from the get-go, and that's my feeling. And I also think there's distractions if you're sitting at home. I mean, it's just like, when there was, remote schooling, or when, as a former therapist, therapy remotely, that, your attention is often less focused and more likely to be divided because there's probably other things going on than when you're collectively together.
I'll say that I'm happy to go either way. I also work remotely and I spend a lot of my day on Zoom, so I would kind of welcome the opportunity to meet in person. But I also wonder, just deciding on if it's an ad hoc basis or what we're available for as they're coming up. I don't know if we have that kind of flexibility, but I kind of echo what you're saying about it. I appreciate the opportunity to be in person, even though I also would agree that we can be just as productive remotely. It's just not as
All right, so I'm going to say that it sounds like what we should vote on is a next meeting with a preference for being in person, an option for remote if somebody needs the ability to come in virtually because they can't otherwise be here, and then we can continue to adjust that as we go forward. The only other thought that I have before we go for a vote is in terms of, there was one piece that was brought up, which is what is actually allowed by the state. I know right now we're in this period of time where the governor declared that this has been extended or whatever. And the one other thing I would say to this is, if it were that the committee wanted to, be virtual or hybrid, then I wouldn't let the potential that someday in the future that's going to be taken away from us stop us from doing it when we have it. Mm-hmm. So, but that's, do we need or want to vote on the whole, next meeting will be preference in person with a hybrid option? Or are we just going to say that? Any naysayers, disagreements?
I'm certainly good with that.
Okay, sounds good. Next question, Jenny was about to bring up Monday times.
So you read my mind. Does this work for folks? I'm wide open, so I'm fine with whatever.
Yeah, so Mondays sort of work for me. I have most Mondays though I have 7 o'clock commitment, so I might have to step out. I've heard from the city though that rooms might be at a premium on Mondays and that Thursdays are potentially the best day. But I can't
Thursday.
Okay, so Mondays generally work for me, 6 or even earlier too. But I might have to step out at 7. But that's just an FYI. But I could definitely meet before that.
The Rail Trail Committee meets typically on Mondays at 7, and we've been kind of all over the map in terms of what time of month, but.
Shall we just, do we want to, well, I feel like we should just go back to Calendly for the next one as well. But, because that way, I don't think anybody here probably has their complete calendar memorized for the next month. What's that?
I brought mine with me.
Is that all right if we just go with Calendly option again for the next thing?
Sure.
Aim for 3 to 4 weeks for the next Joanne. Owen, would you be willing to send that out to folks?
Absolutely, yeah. I was going to say too. I mean, are there other? I just want to put it out there. Are there other days of the week that might work? So you said you can't do Thursdays.
Correct.
Okay. Are there other days of the week that work for people here?
I can probably do any day except Thursday.
Okay.
Mondays are best for me, but also we have our energy meetings on Mondays. Right now we're doing the fourth Monday, which would be the end of February, which we meet earlier. We meet from 3 to 5, but I know the Conservation Commission meets at 6 on those days. So that's competition for Cassie potentially, as well as for meeting space. We moved to the fourth Monday only because the third Monday runs afoul of several holidays in the first few months of the year. So you have to keep that in mind too, because there's President's Day, there's Patriots Day, and Memorial Day are all Monday holidays. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, just the Conservation Commission for Cal too meets twice a month typically.
All right,
It's the
second and fourth.
Tries to stay within the schedule of the second and fourth Monday of each month. Some months we're going to be out of that order, but
Monday seems somewhat overloaded.
Yeah, I mean, I can make a Tuesday work potentially. It's a little tricky depending on. And Fridays. Well, Friday the offices are closed, right? So.
Right. I would prefer Mondays. Most of the times I can make other days, but I can think of 1 week in February where Tuesday through Thursday cannot work.
Right.
But that's also a one-off.
Yeah. Oh, yes, so.
I mean, it's complicated with city council meetings, but does the third or fourth Wednesdays of the month ever work for anyone here? I mean, third or second or fourth Wednesday. I'm just trying to. I mean, I can send out a Calendly and we can figure it out.
If we are okay with pushing that, we're at the end of January. So if the next one, if we went with like the first Monday, that would probably alleviate conflicts with most of what we've talked about.
Right.
So we went to like March 4th.
Okay.
Would potentially be an option.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just throw that out
Okay.
there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite sure that would work.
I can check with the city clerk.
Most usually.
Yep.
That's fine. Yeah, that's. Why don't we go ahead and pencil that in, check it with the city clerk. We'll take that down as a date. If for some reason it doesn't work, then we'll fall back down again.
March 4th is a week.
March 4th.
At this time or?
I can't do it. It's hard for me to do earlier. So, 6, sounds good, folks. March 4th and 6th.
I know, I hate these places.
Well, Mr. Chair, we've arrived at the end of our agenda. So if you'd like to, you could ask it for a motion to adjourn. Thank you. I don't know why that wasn't like
until
right.
the meeting comes to a full stop.
Unless there's anything else you'd like to discuss.
So, just to recap for everybody, we have Owen and David are going to get us a draft resolution together for next time. All participants are going to bring their short list of things that they want to prioritize, and we're going to have a prioritization discussion as one of our agenda, as like our first priority for next time. Jenny and Hal, we're going to dig into the pollinator action plan, potentially as its own agenda item or potentially as part of the prioritization option. All other things that we will need to be figuring out in the not too distant future is web presence, whether with the city or something else, which probably we want to wait till resolution time before we go with, but it's going to be an important part of outreach. I guess that goes on the priority list. Am I missing anything that we decided on March 4th at 6 p.m. unless that doesn't work for the city, in which case we'll fall back to calendar. Is there anything else that we talked about that we want to be prepped up for next time?
It's a good summary.
Actually, if you don't mind, are you able to email that out to the members, that summary? There's nothing, we're not deliberating.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder, so, yeah, that'd
Okay.
be awesome. That would be wonderful.
Right, it's helpful to get reminders with the agenda and all that.
Also, prior to the next meeting, from the clerk of that frame that you took notes on. Document and how you want those. There's the city.
I can find some time to. I'm not a very good clerk, but I think I could get some like, because it doesn't have to. Let's talk between meetings, and I'm happy to help.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you go back and look at how minutes are written, it sort of gives you a general template of.
Well, no, like okay, so I'm on another committee that the chair provides the template, and then that goes.
I have no idea.
Some committees will use the agenda and we'll fill it in from there, or there's like options, so.
Okay,
Like I said,
so let's decide how this, what he wants that, notes captured and shared.
Right.
Or do whatever.
I will, how about, I'll come up with an agenda. We can try to fill in like notes on the agenda items, just as probably a Google Doc.
Well, there's something that needs to be shared with the city private meetings.
It's the agenda.
The agenda, correct.
Yeah, the base document, we can do a PDF out of for the agenda. And then that same document, you can take notes if you want. If that works.
Yeah, if you need assistance putting the agenda together, getting info from technology departments like that, let me know. I can help
Okay.
you with that.
What was your name again?
Jamie.
Jamie, sorry.
It's okay. Same thing for when you were asking about a web presence.
Yeah.
You mean just like a listing on the city website of the
Yeah.
committee itself, or?
Yeah, I was hoping we could get like potentially an entire like web page and potentially, eventually I think we'll be wanting like some kind of like structure underneath, or if we can't do it through the city, then we can talk about doing it elsewhere.
Yeah, again, I think they could at least add the committee to the city's webpage if it's not there already.
Right.
Is it there now? Okay, so I have to admit I haven't looked. But now it'll need to be updated with the officers.
Yeah, I'd be also curious to see just how much information we can go directly through, or at least a set of links or resources to get people bootstrapped in. But again, that's kind of its own subcommittee action working group. Okay, so March 4th at 1800, Melody the clerk, me to make an agenda, figure out agenda stuff, and give you a document that you can fill in. David and I are working on the resolution, challenging for the following the interaction saying me to send out this list of stuff. Anything else?
Everyone to think about priorities
Everyone to think about priorities,
and write them down.
but not sure. All right.
Big hints.
Does somebody want to do a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
It's been motioned. Do we have a second? Motion has been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Didn't think so.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.